Of the many motor cars that have paved the way for the modern vehicle, there are few that truly represent the golden age of classic British motoring history, characterised by a distinguished range of models. Among the most memorable of these stands the Austin, one of Britain's most famous pioneering car producers, and one of the first to provide vehicles for the mass motoring market. Founded in the early 1900s by Herbert Austin, the company is very fondly remembered for some unique creations, including the small and simple bestseller, the Austin 7, and the revolutionary Austin Healey Sprite that inspired the affectionate Frog Eye nickname. Such Austin favourites make up a range of reputable cars, and today we have the pleasure of exploring some of the finest. But before we revisit these halcyon days of Britain's motoring past, let us first take a brief look at the foundations of Austin to discover the story behind the classics that we've come to admire so much today. The roots of the company grew from the adventurous and determined nature of Herbert Austin himself, who, in the early days, gained experience at a number of engineering companies in Australia, before returning to Britain, where he began working for the Wolseley Sheep Shearing Machine Company in Birmingham. It was here that he executed his first experiments in the production of automobiles, resulting in a three-wheeler and later a four-wheeler that he entered into the 1,000-mile trial with successful results. Soon after this, in 1901, Austin was appointed manager of the newly founded Wolseley Tool and Motorcar Company, where he stayed for 4 years, before branching out on his own to form the Austin Motor Company. Finding a derelict building in Longbridge just outside Birmingham, Herbert Austin got to work, beginning with a visit to the 1905 Olympia Motor Show, where he promoted his business and sought orders for the first ever Austin car. As the Austin car range developed, the company's reputation for dependability grew, and the factory at Longbridge steadily expanded. Not only claiming recognition for a succession of highly acclaimed cars, Austin even produced an award-winning tractor, and for a short time, a range of aeroplanes. As well as this, the company was also one of the major contributors to producing munitions during the two world wars, which gave way to the rapid expansion of its factory and workforce, and even the building of its own nearby flying ground. Moving from strength to strength, it was only a matter of time before Austin made its impact on the overseas markets, with which came a global recognition of its impressive repertoire. And so, let us now look to the first Austin model featured in our collection today, whilst we also discover just why the great name has retained its popularity and has come to represent the best of Britain's motoring legacy. After the Great War, Austin Motors, like a lot of businesses, was suffering some financial strains, and understandably, the board members were not enthralled with the idea of commencing a new project, especially as the company was having to reduce its size. Herbert Austin himself, however, saw things very differently and was determined to follow through with his plans for a revolutionary small car that would be accessible to the masses. And so, Austin's prodigy car, the Austin 7, was created. With the help of Stanley Edge, an 18-year-old apprentice draftsman who'd joined Longbridge in 1917, Herbert Austin worked secretly at his home in Bromsgrove with much haste to produce the new compact vehicle. With a lot of the work taking place in the billiard room, rumour had it that the Austin 7 was sized in relation to the dimensions of the billiard table itself, a belief that marks just one of the many anecdotal stories surrounding the Austin 7. The idea of producing a car that weighed no more than 800 pounds was a first for British motoring, and meant that the whole design was brand new from top to bottom. Originally, Austin's plan was to create a two-cylinder car, but with some persuasion from his young apprentice, this was changed to 4, making it one of the smallest 4-cylinder power plants that had yet been produced. Also, with a 2.5-inch bore and 3-inch stroke, the Austin 747cc engine produced a horsepower of 10. Whilst the young Stanley Edge was responsible for the engine design, Austin concentrated on the chassis, body and running gear, and during 1922, 3 prototypes were produced. To the delight of a watching crowd of mechanics from the experimental department, Herbert Austin himself took the first completed model for a test drive, echoing images from 17 years earlier when he'd taken to the road in the very first Austin car. Proving a success, the Austin 7 was exhibited at the Olympia Motor Show. By 1923, the model had been launched for sale. Marked as the motor for the millions, the outstanding success of the car was just what Austin Motors needed. Not only did it secure the company's financial situation, but it was also the answer to Herbert Austin's ambition of motorising the masses. With an Austin 7 initially costing just £165, it was extremely good value, because at the time, Henry Ford's mass-produced Model T was the only car in the UK that could be bought for a lower price than the 7. Receiving unprecedented praise from motoring journalists, the Austin 7 went on to greater heights of fame when it made its impact on the motorsporting world. Even racing legend A.C.R. White, who'd previously won at Brooklands and Shelsley in an Austin 20 horsepower model, took to the tracks in an Austin 7, winning at Monza in Italy and Brooklands. Such sporting successes boosted sales even further. Putting sporting achievements aside, for the average person who owned a standard Austin 7, a speed of 35 miles per hour was about as high as you could comfortably go. The A-profiled chassis frame of the car could be described as quite frail and flexible, with a featured transverse leaf spring to the front and cantilever leaf spring to the rear. The handling and brakes were also short of being perfect, but these factors were outweighed by the car's charming appeal and good value for money, which was, of course, a significant selling point, especially for new motorists. Over the years, brake horsepower climbed up to 17, and so by the middle of the 1930s, the model could exceed a speed of 50 miles per hour. Also, in keeping with the changing times, Austin improved both style and engineering, which made sure that the Austin 7 retained its immense popularity for over a decade. In fact, it was a best-selling model for Austin for a long period of time, with peak production soaring to over 20,000 cars per year. In its day, the Austin 7 would quite often lose all of its value after 5 years of existence, but this didn't discourage people from remaining faithful to the small and simple family car. Even old and rusty 7s would keep thundering on year after year. With production ending after 16 years in 1939, over 290,000 Austin 7s were sold. An extensive range of coachwork styles were applied to the 7, but the standard square-shaped body was the most common, and the factory churned out tens of thousands each year. Most factory-built models were either two-door Tourers or saloons with 4 seats, which within the 75-inch wheelbase of the car was a tight squeeze, to say the least. This is probably why special coachwork styles gave way to the occasional two-seater Austin 7. With its compact and space-saving layout, budget price tag, not to mention its unique character, the Austin 7 in many ways shares the same groundbreaking ethos to that of the Mini, which followed years later. After the end of production, the Austin 7 engine found further use in the Reliant three-wheelers, and with much enthusiasm from the 750 Motor Club, power output was greatly increased for high-speed racing. Today, the Austin 7 stands out as an all-time favourite classic, not just amongst Austins, but also for the entire motoring world. Shooting to extreme levels of success in its day, the Austin 7 has become an iconic masterpiece, and one that will be with us for a very long time to come. The Austin A55 was announced in February 1957 and was introduced as a result of the British Motor Corporation's decision to restyle a collection of their best-selling models. Set to replace the A50, the new A55 had a lot to live up to, with its predecessor's 3-year lifespan peaking at a production figure of over 114,000 cars. Only time would tell if the A55 would follow in the footsteps of its successful parent car. By the time of the A55's launch, the British Motor Corporation was firmly established as a powerful enterprise, the formation of which had been the result of an agreement between Austin's Leonard Lord and Lord Nuffield, whose own brands included Morris, Wolseley, Riley and MG. The idea of forming this conglomerate of British car companies was to secure the UK motor business, which some feared was being undermined in light of the growing success of manufacturers from abroad. However, putting these good intentions to one side, BMC didn't face an entirely happy future, and accusations of badge engineering soon followed. Such criticism can certainly be forgotten though when we take a look at this A55, which as we can see for ourselves still exudes the timeless Austin charm that has become so famous. This particular model was among those produced during the first year of sales in 1957, at which time it would have come with a price tag of around £678. Differing to the former A50 model, the Austin designers gave the A55 a more up-to-date body look, a style which Austin was also applying to the larger A95 Westminster that was also launched in 1957. Now, with a chrome trim moulding along the full length of its sides, some models underwent an optional two-tone paint treatment, which, it has to be said, some people loved and others loathed. Today, the two-tone paint is a sure reminder of the A55's motoring era, although this stylistic feature continues to divide enthusiasts over matters of taste. The restyle of the A50 that gave way to the A55 also involved a slight modification to the front. However, the design team predominantly focused on the rear of the car. Changes included a larger back window, new sheet metal, softer wing line, and, more significantly, a longer back section with a lower sill. In turn, such changes gave way to the practical advantage of gaining more boot space. The A55 may have been dissimilar to the A50 in looks, but they were almost identical in terms of mechanical features and had the same 51 brake horsepower 4-cylinder engine with overhead valve. This said, the engine, a BMC B series, was only identical to that of the last A50 models, which had been uprated and built over a 4-month period. Gearboxes were available as manual with Borg-Warner overdrive, or semi-automatic, whilst the top speed lay at about 75 miles per hour. In 1958, the model saw its most significant change, with the introduction of optional centre-floor gear change equipment. Produced at the Longbridge factory in Birmingham, the A55 certainly lived up to the success of the A50, as well as its reputation for good performance. Having proved highly popular, a Mark II A55 was introduced in January 1959, and the original became known as the Mark I. The Mark II A55 arrived at a time when BMC was starting to apply a standard body design to its entire range of medium-sized saloon cars. The A55 was one of the first to undergo the Italian influence of the Pininfarina design house and received a new style of body with tall rear fins and a wider, more square-shaped mesh-fronted grille. The Farina style was seen in a range of BMC cars, including Morris, MG, Riley and Wolseley, as well as Austin, all adopting the same 4-door passenger cabin as well as a B-series engine of some form or another. But even with the same basic body construction, each make was given different features to ensure some sort of individual recognition. To distinguish the A55 from the rest, particularly the very similar-looking Morris Oxford Series 5, Austin branded the cars with split-bench seats, Austin-style trim details, and of course, various two-tone paintwork. Even so, the A55 and Morris Oxford were similar in both performance and look, and although they were marketed towards the same BMC customers, the cars were sold through separate dealers and became serious competitors for each other. As for the engine of the Mark II, again the dependable B series was used, although this time featured an SU carburettor, previously used only in Nuffield makes. With this, power crept up slightly to 52 horsepower, whilst transmission options were very limited. Later, in 1960, a Countryman Estate variant was introduced, and after which the A60 took over, replacing the reliable and successful A55 in 1961. One of Austin's most famous hallmarks of the post-war period was a range of models inspired by a home county's name theme. These ranged from the popular A40 Devon and Dorset to the A40 Cambridge and A70 Hereford, which together served Austin faithfully for many years and now represent a particularly momentous period in Austin's history. Among the fine range of home county models stands this classic-looking Austin, the A40 Somerset, which first appeared in 1952. Despite the Somerset's short production run of only 2 years, this well-rounded model sold in staggering numbers that exceeded well beyond the 173,000 mark. The A40 Somerset was part of an intensive development programme by Austin to produce a succession of models that would secure the company's success and increase its output. Leonard Lord was particularly keen to gain a foothold in overseas sales, and sure enough, Austin became an even stronger contender within the car market, not only at home, but abroad too. Just 1 year before the launch of the A40 Somerset, Austin built a new car assembly plant at its Longbridge site in Birmingham to cope with its massive production figures. As well as this assembly block, which at the time was considered to be the most modern of its kind, an administration building was also constructed, and was even nicknamed the Kremlin by Longbridge employees. The A40 Somerset was a replacement of the 2-door Dorset and 4-door Devon, which were both introduced in 1947. They were the first models to be produced after the Second World War, during which time Austin had only produced military vehicles, and the new models were even available in a range of variants, including a van, countryman estate and pickup. In particular, it was the A40 Devon that attracted overwhelming popularity and sold in considerable numbers, which soon led to the discontinuation of the Dorset altogether. The A40 Somerset was closely based on the Devon, with very few mechanical differences being made, most notably an increase of power to the 1200cc overhead valve engine. A restyle gave the Somerset super curves and a voluptuous shape that was shared very closely with a larger Austin model, the A70 Hereford. The A40 Somerset was available as a 4-door, 4-seater saloon and, 8 months later, was also available as a 2-door, 4-seater drop-head coupe. The coupe, more commonly referred to as a convertible, was sold in much smaller numbers compared to the saloon version, and is quite a rare model to come across today. The A40 Somerset's construction featured a separate chassis, while suspension to the front was independent with coil springs, beam axle and semi-elliptic leaf springs to the rear. The interior, with its comfortable foam rubber seating, was upholstered in real leather and gave a good layout with generous legroom. Also inside the Somerset, you'd find a steering column change, an umbrella handbrake lever and a front bench seat. Today, Such features, along with the model's dynamic shape, have made the A40 Somerset a classic car in its own right, and the style is certainly in keeping with an American theme. In its day, Austin was keen to emphasise the good looks and pleasurable motoring experience of driving an A40 Somerset, and particular attention was given to its unfaltering crawling capacity in slow-moving traffic, as well as its ability to spring to life at the touch of an accelerator. The end of the Somerset's production came in 1954 and was immediately followed by the launch of the A40 Cambridge. Although this new model formed the third generation of the Austin A40 range, it had very little in common with its predecessor, as it was the first to be designed under the BMC umbrella. Compared to the Somerset, the A40 Cambridge took on a squarer appearance, and a more modern body shell replaced the separate chassis and had a lower and slimmer design. As with the other models in the A40 range, a 2-door and 4-door Cambridge had been planned for production. However, this time, the 2-door model never came to fruition. Although the legendary Flying A mascot was still present on the A40 Cambridge, the traditional Austin grille design, as used on the Somerset, was abandoned and replaced with a full-width grille. The Somerset's successor also featured slightly hooded headlights, a larger boot, and modified front suspension, not to mention the characteristic ribbed rear quarters that quickly acquired the cow hips nickname. Even with the succession of models that followed the A40 Somerset, it continued to remain a very popular choice among motorists as a robust and dependable family car. Comfortable, delightfully styled, and a pleasure to drive even today, the A40 Somerset is still admired all over the world and is enjoyed by hundreds of enthusiasts. With its robust performance and stylish looks, the Austin Heavy 12 was a very successful vehicle of the 1920s and 30s. This particular soft-top model dates back to 1929 and is a wonderful example of the great Austin Heavy 12.4 classic. Not only proving popular among the motorists of its era, the Heavy 12 was also a long-standing and highly respected model among London's early taxicab firms and served very dutifully even after the Second World War. In fact, Austin had presented a taxi model to the Public Carriage Office as early as 1906. However, this proposal had been rejected. Austin's first taxicab to grace the streets of London made its debut appearance during the following year, in 1907, with 10 of the models being used by the Taxi Deluxe Company of Kensington. The new version incorporated a driver's seat that was positioned alongside the engine. More recently, the British Motor Heritage Centre at Gaydon in Warwickshire has featured one of these vintage taxicabs in their display. Only a short time after Austin had developed its first taxicab, the company produced a 15-horsepower model. Now, with a more conventional layout, the new vehicle overtook production of the original within just 1 year. Later, in 1925, Austin developed 12 models of the 7 and exhibited them at the Commercial Motor Show. However, the Austin 7 taxi was a flop with passengers, and all 12 models were taken back to the Longbridge factory, where they were converted into regular tourers. Replacing the Austin 7 taxi, the company introduced a modified version of the heavy 12.4. The idea was presented to Austin Motors by the dealers Mann and Overton, and the new model, suitably meeting the conditions of fitness as laid out by the Public Carriage Office, became the most successful taxicab Austin had yet produced. Known for its longevity and steady 45-mile-per-hour pace, the Heavy 12 was loved by London taxi drivers and passengers alike. So it's no wonder its production lasted for well over 9 years. 5 basic models were available during this period, ranging from the HL, or High Lot, that was introduced in 1930, to the Heavy 12.4 FL, the Flash Lot, that ceased production in 1940. The Austin Heavy 12 not only made its mark on the streets of London, where it became a familiar and friendly sight, but it also took the starring role in the Gumdrop Stories, a series of children's books written by Val Biro. The tales of magic and adventure are based around a blue Austin Clifton Heavy 12.4 that's found by a gentleman in a scrapyard. The Heavy 12, named Gumdrop, is taken home by the new owner and carefully restored, after which the pair go on a series of expeditions where they get themselves into all manner of situations. The Gumdrop Stories alone have ensured that the Heavy 12 has made an impression the world over, with the stories being translated into a wide variety of languages, ranging from French to Japanese. But where do the origins of this worldwide renowned Austin classic come from? Well, the answer is simply Herbert Austin himself, along with the help of Harvey Ducroix, as together they decided to introduce a far more compact version of the Austin 20 with a smaller engine capacity. An early Heavy 12 would have been narrower and lighter than the later models, but the 12 horsepower meant a lower road tax, which at the time was based on a horsepower-related system. For a time, particularly around 1927 and 28, fabric bodies were very popular on the Heavy 12, with companies such as the Gordon Coachworks providing expert services. In fact, a wide range of body styles were available, including the Burnham Saloon, the Clifton and the Windsor, with each name exuding a sense of grace and quality in keeping with Austin's distinguished reputation. An Austin Heavy 12 would quite often belong to a household of good standing, and was the ideal car for the town's local doctor or any other person within an established profession. Today, the Heavy 12, with its stylish looks and dignified poise, is a popular choice for wedding transport, giving ample room and a luxuriously indulgent ride. In 1958, the vintage Austin 12.4 register was founded by a group of enthusiasts, and as the name suggests, the association was predominantly interested in 12.4 models. However, the register soon encompassed a broad range of Austin models and has since changed its name to the Vintage Austin Register. But for any 12.4 fans out there, this is definitely the place to go for information and advice, with the register's spare scheme being an invaluable point of reference. Robust, stylish and inspirational, the Heavy 12 is a true Austin vintage classic and looks set to remain a favourite among collectors everywhere. Among Austin's best-loved pre-war ranges stands the Austin 10. In its day, seen as the perfect answer to family motoring, people were instantly attracted to the car's practicality and good value for money, which explains why the Austin 10 is still highly popular and collectible, remaining a favourite for many enthusiasts up and down the country. Making its entry into the mass market in 1932, the Austin 10 was a success from the start and offered a range of model types. One of the rarest Austin 10 variants was the Sherborne, a 6-light saloon that helped make up the range of second-generation Austin 10s, which for our programme today we have the pleasure of exploring. As one of the only models to be produced between the months of January and July in 1936, this particular Sherborne was acquired by its current owner in 1970, after which a restoration project commenced. Restoring an Austin 10 can actually be surprisingly pain-free, especially compared to other classic car projects, as quite often spare parts for the 10 are easy to track down through the Austin 10 Drivers Club, which has an excellent website. This particular model was completely stripped and rebuilt to the superb standard that we can admire today, and is a fine example of the rare Austin 10 Sherborne. It was, however, 4 years before the introduction of the Sherborne that the first Austin 10s were introduced, beginning with the 10.4 Chrome Rad and 10.4 Sport, named the Ripley. Although featuring very similar engine specifications, the more economical Chrome Rad could reach 52 miles per hour, whilst its sporting counterpart, the Ripley, with downdraft carburation and high-lift camshaft, could reach a speed of 65 miles per hour. Well over 50,000 Chrome Rad variants, along with an exclusive 150 Ripleys, were produced over the 2-year production period, and both set a high standard for their successors. The original Chrome Rad was even available in Tourer, saloon and cabriolet forms, as well as a 2-seater. The initial Chrome Rad and Ripley models with 10 horsepower featured a 4-cylinder side valve engine with cubic capacity of 1125, the specifications of which were retained throughout the series of 10 horsepower models that followed. Also living on into the next series was the basic design of the Chrome Rad, which underwent very few changes. The second generation Austin 10 appeared in 1934, at which time Austin were offering the motoring public a staggering choice of 44 separate models. The Austin 10, seen as a totally new type of family car, had become highly popular, and the improved range, along with the Sherborne, now included the famous Lichfield Saloon, the Colwyn Cabriolet, and the open-road Tourer. The main differences between the new range and the earlier Chrome Rad was a radiator cowl, painted to the car's specific body colour, as well as a slight improvement in speed, which was pushed up to 55 miles per hour. The Sherborne was slightly longer than the Lichfield and was distinguishable by the rear quarter windows, which we can see here. Featuring 4-speed transmission with synchromesh on the second, third and top gears, the Sherborne in 1936 would have retailed at £178, an unbeatable bargain for a small-sized family car. In excess of 54,000 second-generation Austin 10s were produced from 1934 to 1936, at which point production of the third-generation models took over. Still featuring the same engine specifications, the new models did receive an extra boost of power, stepping the top speed up to a swift 60 miles. The Austin 10 range now offered a cabriolet known as the Conway and a saloon named the Cambridge, which was to become one of the most famous Austin 10 variants ever produced. Featuring a cowled radiator shell and easy clean wheels, the third generation Austin 10 was also equipped with Girling mechanical brakes, and attention to style was displayed through the fashionable twin D-shaped windows to the rear and a redesign of the dashboard. Remaining economical, practical and as popular as ever, the new range was given a more curvaceous body with smoother lines and softer edges. Indicative of the changing times, the restyle was quick to meet the contemporary tastes and high expectations of Austin customers, and by 1939, total production of the Austin 10's latest range had surged to over 73,000 cars. With the broad range of Austin 10s on offer, not to mention the ease of maintaining one of these practical and stylish cars, the motoring market of the 1930s certainly had no reason to be disappointed, and today not a lot has changed. Still celebrated for its reliability, quality of design and elegance, Austin fans and owners alike continue to enjoy the charming character of this classic car. During the 1950s, BMC realised that there was a gap in the market for a new sports car. Following a discussion between the corporation's chairman, Leonard Lord, and Donald Healey, plans were made for the creation of a revolutionary and compact budget sports car, resulting in the launch of the Austin-Healey Sprite. The Austin-Healey business partnership had initially formed after the 1952 Earls Court Motor Show, where the Healey 100 sports car had been launched. Following this, the Austin-Healey 100 was produced, reaping massive sales success and proving that the partnership had been an excellent idea. The decision was made to produce the Austin-Healey Sprite by utilising a range of parts taken from the Austin A35 saloon, making the project an efficient and cost-effective venture. Owing to its easy assembly and accessibility of parts, the Austin-Healey Sprite started off its sales life at the very reasonable price of £455, but it quickly went on to establish a successful motorsports career. Fun and easy to maintain, the Mark I model, which we have the pleasure of viewing today, made a huge impact on the motoring market with its endearing frog-eye look, and was unofficially named the Frog-Eyed Sprite. Its American export derivative acquired the equally affectionate nickname of the Bug-Eye. The first prototype for the Austin-Healey Sprite didn't, however, feature the unique headlamp design. Instead, the prototype had pop-up lights in order to give the car a smoother line. It was at quite a late stage before the car entered into production, and only after the consideration of the expense that such features as the fold-back headlights were scrapped and replaced by two fixed lamps on the bonnet. Remarkably, the frog-eye design that had materialised almost accidentally went on to become a very treasured and possibly most famous characteristic of the Austin-Healey Sprite range. Instead of having a standard body construction with a separate chassis, the Austin-Healey Sprite was fitted with an all-in-one body shell. Also, the bonnet and front wings could be hinged back as one piece, which provided easy access to the engine bay and helped keep assembly costs down. Apart from the steering components of the Sprite, which came from the Morris Minor, most of the other components, including the transmission, front suspension and rear axle, were provided by Austin. The engine, also of Austin origin, was a twin-carb 4-cylinder unit with 948 cc's and was taken from BMC's small-capacity A series that had been launched in 1951 to power the famous Austin 7. The A series went on to become a successful mainstay for BMC cars, finding its way into a succession of well-known British vehicles. Although the Austin-Healey Sprite was, and still is, adored by a huge fan base, it wasn't the most practical of cars. But then again, it wasn't designed for practical purposes. With minimal luggage space, a non-existent boot lid, and a somewhat cramped interior, the Austin-Healey Sprite was not an option for family trips to the seaside, and along with its lack of side windows or external door handles, it really was a very basic vehicle. That said, no one could dispute the appealing nature of the Sprite, and the delight of driving one of these charming sports cars, on top of which its ease of maintenance and low cost made it an unbeatable package. From its launch in 1958 to its discontinuation in 1961, no fewer than 48,987 frog-eyed Sprites were produced, all built at the MG factory in Abingdon. Once the great impact of this small sports car had been recognised by BMC's rival companies, vicious competition was inevitable. One very strong competitor was the Triumph Standard, whose design team immediately got to work on the Bomb project. This led to the development of the sensational Spitfire and the beginning of an intense battle between the two car companies. After the success of the trend-setting Mark I Sprite, several more derivatives followed, although the frog eye design was dropped and a more conventional look was applied. As the Mark II appeared, so did a slightly more upmarket version, the very similar-looking MG Midget, both models sharing a squarer-shaped body compared to the Mark I Sprite. As time went on, more practical and mechanical advancements were made, including, among other things, the addition of a boot lid, improved brakes and more powerful engines. One aspect of the original frog-eyed beauty that wasn't improved upon was the engine bay access, as the newer models, with their narrower and lighter bonnet panels, gave far more limited access to this area. Not only making its mark on British motoring history, but across the rest of the world too, the famous frog-eyed Sprite has become a legend. Fun, carefree and cost-effective. Today, the Austin Healey Sprite holds a unique standing amongst the world's most treasured classic sports cars. And so this brings us to the end of this fascinating exploration into some of Austin's finest classic cars. From the fun and endearing character of the Austin Healey Sprite to the robust yet highly stylised A40 Somerset, Austin has certainly produced some remarkable cars that, to this day, never fail to attract the admiration and excitement of enthusiasts and collectors alike. But what of Austin Motors today? Well, as we know, the company, along with some of the country's other great car producers, united to form the British Motor Corporation. The merger gave way to an extensive bank of knowledge and experience, and the means to provide the motoring public with exactly what they wanted. This allowed the production of a succession of quality-made cars, priced at competitive rates, which soon gave way to an acceleration of production figures and unlimited success. It was quite a while after the formation of BMC that Austin produced its own engine in what had been a relatively long time. Launched in 1969, the engine was used in the 5-door 5-speed Austin Maxi hatchback, although, whilst the engine was brand new, the rest of the model was heavily based on existing parts. It wasn't long after this, during the 70s, that another major change took place, with BMC becoming part of British Leyland. Later, the company underwent a name change to become Austin Rover. Among the last Austin-badged cars to be produced were the Metro, Maestro and Montego, and by the middle of the 1980s, the Rover name, considered by some to be the more upmarket brand of the two, replaced Austin altogether. Even so, Austin's Longbridge worksite in Birmingham became the Rover Group's principal plant. Today, the famous Austin name is far from forgotten and retains a strong presence as one of the greatest and best-loved car producers Britain has ever seen. Austin's most memorable models have inspired people all over the world to become enthusiasts and classic car owners, and there's an extensive range of Austin clubs to refer to for information, with people always willing to offer their expert advice. Likewise, for anyone considering making a classic car investment, whether it be an Austin or not, car clubs are a great place to do your research and locate the classic vehicle you've always dreamed of. Whether you're into the old Austin faithfuls, the lively Sprite, or the much-loved Austin 7, there's something for everyone, with an Austin car making a worthy addition to any classic collection.